Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Joe Ai from the Counseling and Psychology Department. Today we will talk about the history of the ethical principle of the research. Throughout the human history, we devoted our life to exploring natural phenomena, generating knowledge, and conducting research. Sometimes, the research can be beneficial to the human society. However, some research was infamous because the researcher failed to balance the harm and the risk to the society and human subjects. The tricky question is how we can ensure the human right while pertaining the beneficial to the society during the research progress. Nowadays, we have the common principles to help the researcher to protect the human subject's welfare. Nonetheless, those principles were often based on the history of inhuman experiments. The purpose of history is to let us realize the importance of the research ethics. It provides a real-life example of tragedy. If researchers neglect the importance of human dignity in research progress. Research is a scientific and systematic approach to generate knowledge. Conducting research requires human subjects. Throughout the history of human development, we have conducted research in various situations. From the classic laboratory setting to the social science research that often happens in real society, the research on cyberspace in 20th century to the current virtual reality research. Although the research context varies, a similar set of ethical research principles often guide us to ensure the human rights in the research procedures. They are respect, beneficence, and justice. For respect, it means that respecting the human subjects, concerning about the dignity and autonomy of the subjects, and use proper informed consent. For beneficence, it means that protecting subjects from harm, balance the risk and beneficial of the research. The most important point is that do no harm to the human subjects. Finally, justice. Subjects are fairly and adequately selected based on the purpose of the research. The population of research subjects should be similar to those who may benefit from the research outcomes. Have you ever wondered why the research principles among different situations are so universal? We found those core ethical principles written from several classic experiments. Those principles were written from inhuman experiment treatments and the research process in the human history. World War II is a significant turning point in modern research ethics. In 1945 May, the Germans surrendered, and the Allies discovered the Nazis have committed innumerable crimes. One of the most infamous ones is called the thanatology, the science of producing death. In the extermination camps in Poland and the concentration camp all over Europe, the officer discovered the devastating human medical experiments, including the fatality experiment with poisons, electric shocks. Nearly all subjects were forced to participate. Their human rights were seriously violated. In December 1946 to August 1947, 23 medical doctors who were initially trained to save people were found to conduct numerous inhuman experiments during the war times. They are tried for the war crimes against humanity in the Nuremberg trials. After the trials, the Nuremberg codes were established, which emphasized the human rights in research experiments. The code laid down 10 standards to which physicians must conform while conducting experiments on human subjects. First, the voluntary consent of human subjects is essential. Second, the experiment should yield fruitful results for the society. Third, the experiment should be so designed and based on the results of animal experimentations and a knowledge of natural history of the disease or other problems under the study that anticipate the results will justify experiment's performance. Fourth, the experiment should be conducted to avoid unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injuries. Fifth, no experiment should be conducted where there is a pioneer reason to believe that death or disabling injuries will occur, except in those experiments where experimental physicians also serve as subjects. Sixth, the degree of risk to be taken should never exceed that determined by the humanitarian importance of the problem to be solved by the experiment. Seventh, proper preparations and facilities should be provided to protect the experimental subjects against remote possibility of injuries, disabilities, or death. Eighth, the experiment should be conducted only by scientific qualified persons. The highest degree of skills and care should be required throughout all stages of the experiment of those who conduct or engaged in the experiment. Ninth, during the experiment, the human subject should be at liberty to bring the experiment to an end if he has reached a physical or mental status where continuations or experiment seem to him to be impossible. 10th, during the experiment, the scientist in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment at any stages if he has properly cause to believe in the exercise of good faith, superior skills, and careful judgment required for him, that continuations or experiments is likely to result in injuries, disabilities, or death to the experimental subjects. These 10 standards become the first well-recognized code of research ethics. Some of them are still the core ethical principle in research nowadays. In 1957-61, the thalidomide tragedy, also called the biggest man-made medical disaster ever, happened. The thalidomide was introduced as a tranquilizer. However, the drugs did not revealed by the government. In the United States, more than 1,000 doctors administered the drugs to the patients. The patients were not informed that the drugs are experimental, and there was no previous test about the side effect of pregnancy. As a result, scientists discovered that there is a devastating side effect for the pregnant woman and caused severe deformities in the fetus. More than 10,000 infants were affected, including children born with severe deformities, and around 40% died around the time of birth. The survived infants suffer from limbs, eyes, urinary tract, and heart problems for a lifetime. The thalidomide tragedy raised public concerns. In 1962, there was an amendment to the Federal Drugs, Food and Cosmetic Act to ensure the safety, effectiveness, and reliability of the drugs, authorize standardizations of drugs names, clarify and strengthen existing inspections authorities, and other purposes. The researcher must inform the experimental subjects about the status of drugs, whether it's under review or experimental, and most importantly, obtain patients' concerns. It's become the foundation of informed consent of experimental subjects. Another turning point in the development of research ethics is the Tuskegee syphilis study from 1932 to 72. This is a 40 years long study aimed to track the progressions of syphilis. Around 600 African Americans enrolled on the study, and they were promised to have free medical care. However, most of them were only given placebo treatment, even after the invention of the antibiotics such as penicillins, which were proven effective in 1943 in treating syphilis. Therefore, participants died, went blind, went insane, or suffered from severe health problems due to untreated syphilis. In 1972, more than 130 participants died because of syphilis and related complications. At least 40 families have been infected, and the illness has been passed to their children as well. This study aroused public concern that human subjects need additional protections. 2 years later, in 1974, the United States passed the National Research Act. It created an Institution Review Board to review the ethical and human subjects in the research. The National Commissions state that human subjects should be protected in biomedical and human behavioral research. The most important aspect is that the Review Board should not only consist of scientists, it also include scientists and representatives of the society. In 1978, the Belmont Report was published. It summarized the major ethical principles for the protection of human subjects. The 3 core principles are respect, beneficence, and justice, as shown at the beginning of this video. The Belmar report also included invocation of the captioner principles. For example, risk assessment, informed consent, and etc. Before the experimentation starts, informed consent should be given to the participants, and the subject selection should be fair. The Belmar report is widely adopted by the International Research Board, even nowadays. In the 21st century, the research context is much more different from 1970s. We are now living in the digital era. Cyberspace has become one of the significant platforms for human interactions. Digital life is inseparable from human being. The challenge of research ethics will be transforming the core principle to the cyberspace to protect human rights and ensure the dignity in the modern digital environment. Although this task is challenging in this fast-paced society, the Ethical Review Board, Research Ethical Board, and the Human Research Ethics Committee, we can continue to safeguard the rights of human subjects in the research.